So you can't let outside forces. Well, here's the thing. You can let outside forces affect you. When we say that, like, well, you can't let them. Yeah, you can. And we know that you can because lots of people do. But that's the point. You can choose to. The clay can't determine if it becomes a pot or if it becomes a doorstop or whatever else we would use clay to make, or it becomes a statue. That's why that's why we don't respect what it becomes. When we look at a vase, we admire the vase, true, but we admire the person who made it even more. Wow, you made a beautiful vase. We don't look at the vase and say, wow, you became something beautiful. We admire the person who made it, not the thing that became something. And you sell yourself short when we pretend like we're just clay, like we're just vases. There's nothing about the clay that says it must become a vase. Instead, it's the will of the person who's shaping it. And that becomes the question. What are you going to shape yourself into? What will you allow yourself to become? What will you make yourself into, actually? The really crazy part about life is that you can never know what the best course of life was for you. All you can know is if you made the most of the course of life that you chose. But that's the freedom that I talked about. Tell me if you've heard this before, but life is suffering. You don't get to choose not to suffer, but that last part of it is the important, is the key part. You can choose what it is that you're going to suffer for. That's the freedom of it all. Yeah, but things are just, so hard. Yes, of course. But notice how we say that phrase, it's so hard, as though that's therefore an excuse not to do it. Or that's a justification to stop, and that's a justification to quit. It's not. Everything that's worthwhile is on the other side of difficulty. Everything that's worthwhile is on the other side of fear and uncertainty and risk. Because when you allow those things to stop you, you sell yourself short. You don't become what you could have become. And you're here to become something. What is it? I don't know. For each of us, it's going to be a little bit different. But you will never find out if you stay on this side of fear and jealousy and desire and feelings, he says, like that. Because we do use language like this all the time. I got so mad I just couldn't control myself. Yeah, you could. You chose not to, but you could have controlled yourself. You didn't want to, but you could have controlled yourself. As soon as we start using language like that, I couldn't control myself, or I couldn't resist, or I just couldn't, I was paralyzed, I couldn't move. Yeah, there could be a shock to your system. Like, if I take a bucket of cold water and dump it on you, your body's gonna seize up for a second. But after that, don't you ever go in the water at the ocean, you're like, oh, it's so cold. And then you're like walking around, but you're still walking like this. This whole thing from up here is a choice, man. Everything, because you're still walking around. If you're talking, that means that you really could start to move around, but you're locked in for a reason. Maybe because it's more comfortable, maybe because it's a reaction, but you really could just go, wow, that's freezing. That's cold, man. You could.
Is that why you didn't seize up when you were throwing ice buckets at you?
Yes, exactly. They dumped ice water on me and I was checking my watch, man. Because it's a choice. We talk like it's not. Oh my God, that person got me so angry, I just couldn't control myself. I just punched him in the face. And then there are people around us who will then cheer it on and go, yeah, I understand. No, it's because you wanted to see that person get punched in the face. There's no problem with that. Then just say that. Don't be like, I understand, you couldn't control yourself. Well, then there's no congratulating that person. They couldn't control themselves. They were just a puppet. They were just a marionette. We only want to congratulate people for the choices that they make, for the decisions that they take. And so he's saying it's time that you realize you have something in you that's more powerful than the miraculous, than the things that affect you. We give things outside of ourselves way too much credit and way too much power. If you have a really horrible upbringing, does that therefore mean that you're going to end up being a horrible person? Yeah. But you were just saying a second ago.
What? No.
That would follow from what you were just saying a second ago. Yeah. Well, then how could you possibly become a better person? Or how could you possibly become a good person if you had a horrible upbringing? There's no other way except that there is something in you that's more powerful than the negative forces that are affecting you in your life. They're affecting you, yes. They're impacting you, yes. But they're not determining you. They're not the thing that holds the strings and moves you around like a puppet, like a marionette. They're the things that inform you, sure. They're the things that can help to shape you, but how you're shaped is entirely up to you. If you get a hold of some clay and you form it into a vase, does the vase have a say over whether or not it becomes a vase? No. Do we respect the vase for becoming a vase? Well, why would we possibly respect humans for becoming things that they're shaped by? So you can't let outside forces. Well, here's the thing. You can let outside forces affect you. When we say that, like, well, you can't let them. Yeah, you can. And we know that you can because lots of people do. But that's the point. You can choose to. The clay can't determine if it becomes a pot or if it becomes a doorstop or whatever else we would use clay to make, or it becomes a statue. That's why that's why we don't respect what it becomes. When we look at a vase, we admire the vase, true, but we admire the person who made it even more. Like, wow, you made a beautiful vase. We don't look at the vase and say, wow, you became something beautiful. We admire the person who made it, not the thing that became something. And you sell yourself short when we pretend like we're just clay, like we're just vases. We're so much more than that, because there's nothing inside the vase. There's only things outside of the clay. The clay there's nothing about the clay that says it must become a vase. Instead, it's the will of the person who's shaping it. And that becomes the question. What are you going to shape yourself into? What will you allow yourself to become? What will you make yourself into, actually? Because those are questions. You can allow yourself to become something. How? By giving into these things that are outside of you. They make you dance like a puppet. I'm afraid. Yeah, that makes sense. There's lots of things in life to be afraid of. Heck, life itself is, in some ways, is something to be afraid of when you recognize it is going to end someday. And you have no control over that. Asterisk. Unless you unalive yourself, which you shouldn't do. But even then, we might say, I have no control over it. Of course you do. But the question is not, are you going to encounter fear? Of course you're going to encounter fear. The question is, are you going to allow the fear to stop you? Are you going to allow that cold water to seize you up when you very well could start moving again? Are you going to allow the jealousy to determine how you behave? Are you going to allow your desires to push you around? These are all things that, as Jeremiah pointed out, these are all emotions. And emotions are good. They are good. But they can also stop you from doing the things that you want to do, that you should be doing. And I guess that's probably the best way to say it. The things that you should be doing. Yeah.
Are you saying, like, not as a personal opinion, more as like a statement, are you saying that you should not let your emotions drive you in any way? Or that there are some exceptions to what you're saying?
There are exceptions. But here you look at the emotions he's mentioning here. Fear. Is fear a good emotion? Sometimes, yeah. Yeah, it is. You ever have those intrusive thoughts where you're standing on the sidewalk and there's a bus coming and you're like, oh, I should step in front of this bus. But then the fear of death overtakes you and you decide not to do it? Fear was your friend there. Fear was your friend. But there are things in your life that you do fear, that if you allow that to control you, then you're never going to accomplish anything, because every great accomplishment is on the other side of fear, because a big part of fear is the uncertainty. Is this going to work out? Is this the best thing for me to do? I don't know. You don't know. And the truth of the matter is, and the really crazy part about life is that you can never know what the best course of life was for you. All you can know is if you made the most of the course of life that you chose. But that's the freedom that I talked about. Tell me if you've heard this before, but life is suffering. You don't get to choose not to suffer. But that last part of it is the important, is the key part. You can choose what it is that you're going to suffer for. That's the freedom of it all. You can choose, when you find yourself in a situation, you can choose, am I going to get something out of this? Or am I going to be broken by this? Yeah, but things are just, so hard. Yes, of course. But notice how we say that phrase, it's so hard, as though that's therefore an excuse not to do it. Or that's a justification to stop, and that's a justification to quit. It's not. Everything that's worthwhile is on the other side of difficulty. Everything that's worthwhile is on the other side of fear and uncertainty and risk. Everything that's worthwhile. Think about the things in your life that you really want to go after. Think about the things in life that you think will make you happy. And even the things that you say, like, I just want to be stable. Pursuing stability includes pursuing uncertainty. What is stability? Just having a good job. Okay, but you realize how many jobs are forever? How many people do you know who've been laid off of their jobs? Or the company closed, or they got fired, or something happened. Finding a job that's actually a job for life is pretty rare. And so when you say, I just want something stable, you're taking a risk by taking a job anywhere, and by investing your time and your life into any company. You're risking that the people who run that company are going to do a good job, and that there's going to be a company 10 years from now, 20 years from now, heck, 30 years from now, when you're hoping to retire, and you're hoping that your pension and all of your retirement stuff is going to be there. You're depending on the people who run that company to run it in such a way that all of those things that you've invested your life into are going to be there. Well, I just want to have a family. Yeah, and that's a risk also, because you're investing you're investing yourself into the uncertain, into another person, and they're doing the same into you, of course, as well. Is that person going to be there in 20 years? Not even just like, oh, we always had this idea, well, they might leave you. Yeah, they also might get hit by a bus. Or you might get hit by a bus also. There's always a risk. Now, how much of a risk that is, of course, that's open for discussion, but you can't escape the idea that everything good is on the other side of some risk. And if it's on the other side of some risk, then it's going to involve some element of fear. So what can you do? You can build yourself up in such a way that you're able to absorb the loss if it happens. What happens if you invest yourself in a company and they go bankrupt and you have to find a new job? If you've been building yourself up for the last 10 or 15 years, developing new skills, finding new, expanding your knowledge, then you can probably find another job. If you haven't, well, then you can't. What about if with another person? Same thing. You build yourself up in such a way that you're able to take risks, and not just in finding a job, and not just in finding a mate, but even in terms of loving, even in terms of finding ways to trust people, even finding ways to help other people. Now, but if you help other people, they could just screw you over. Are you strong enough to absorb that loss? Are you strong enough to absorb taking the risk of being able to help other people? I hope so. Because otherwise you're just stagnant. But these are the thing that's in you that's so powerful that you can actually overcome this fear and this jealousy. You can't stop the fear and the jealousy. They're going to happen. You're going to feel them. When people say, I feel no fear, then you're just stupid. You're not paying attention. Or you're a psychopath. One of those two things. It isn't whether or not you feel fear. It's whether or not you push through it anyway. And the stronger that you make yourself, the less you have to suffer the fear. Because you can prove to yourself that you can absorb those hits. But the thing that's in you that's even stronger is this idea of your will. Your will. It's the thing inside of you. It's that decisive element that says, yes, I feel fear. But you know what? I'm going to go forward anyway. Why? It's just sheer power of will. You're out and you're running and you get tired and you want to push yourself and your body's tired. Is there any way to go on? Yes. Sheer determination of will. When you're finding yourself getting sleepy and you're studying and you need this information for tomorrow, Oh, but I'm just so tired. You can accept that and get danced around like a puppet on strings, or you can commit to your will and say, you know what? Deep breath, drink some cold water, and then get back to it and say, I need to finish this. Sheer determination, sheer power of will. We just don't give this any credit today because we're so consumed by the idea that everything outside of us has more influence and more power over us than we do over ourselves. Oh, I can't achieve. Why not? Because people don't like me. Because the world's unfair. The world's always been unfair. The world's always been unfair, but I guess my question is, what are you going to do? Are you going to make it fair all of a sudden? Or are you going to live in the world that presently exists? And you can make the world fairer in the areas that you have control, in the areas that you have influence, but you can't make the whole world fair. But you can do the best that you possibly can within it. And again, the more powerful you become for yourself, the stronger you become for yourself, the greater that sphere of influence that you can create in the world around you. And in that sphere, you can make things fairer. You start your own company. Make your own company really fair. I promise you, by the way, no matter how fair you make it, there will still be people complaining that it's not fair. Maybe now start your own company. Maybe just start your own family. Make things within your family fair. And no matter how fair you make it, you're still going to have that junior high school kid someday who's going to stomp their foot at you and say, you are so unfair. So you do what you can with the life that you have. But you do all that you can. But it's all through this power of will. It's the ability to decide and to see and to go forward. How do you overcome fear? Will. Oh, but it's so hard. It's not impossible. It's difficult. Yes, of course it is. But being difficult isn't a good enough reason. It's not a sufficient reason to stop. Jealousy is not a sufficient reason to stop. Having competing desires is not a sufficient reason to stop. Because when you allow those things to stop you, you sell yourself short. You don't become what you could have become. And you're here to become something. What is it? I don't know. For each of us, it's going to be a little bit different. But you will never find out if you stay on this side of fear and jealousy and desire and feelings, he says, like that. Feelings like that. The feelings that can become so powerful that they feel like they're overcoming us. Don't be overcome by your emotions. Don't be overcome by your intellect either. You're both of these things, intellect and emotions. So embrace all of what you are. Become the best, make the most of those things and become the best of all of those things. Maybe that's your task in life. And when you do that, I think you're going to find that you've mastered yourself. And there's nothing that's harder in the world to master than yourself. And if you can master yourself, you can master anything. Anything, anything, anything. I really hope this makes sense to you sooner than later. I really hope you embrace that sooner than later. Because what you know. You guys are all busy writing to try to catch up, so I'll stop it there. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Yeah.